there is a question that most of us carry around without realizing it. We carry it in the way we rush through our mornings, in the restless feeling that sometimes settles over us at night, in the small but persistent sense that something, somewhere, is slightly off. The question is simple, even if the answer feels far away. The question is, why does life feel this hard? Not every moment, of course. There are days when everything flows, when laughter comes easily, and the sky looks almost impossibly beautiful. But then, something shifts. A plan falls apart. A relationship grows cold. A body gets tired. And in those moments, most of us do one of two things. We either try harder to fix whatever went wrong, or we distract ourselves until the discomfort fades. Neither approach really works for long. More than 2,500 years ago, in a forested region of what is now northern India and southern Nepal, a man sat down under a tree and refused to move until he understood the answer to that question. He was not a god. He was not a supernatural being. He was a human being, curious, determined, and, by all accounts, deeply compassionate. His name, before he became famous, was Siddhartha Gautama. After his great awakening, he came to be called the Buddha, which simply means the awakened one or the one who has woken up. What he discovered under that tree was not a religion in the conventional sense. It was not a set of commandments handed down from the sky. It was more like a diagnosis and a treatment plan, an honest, clear-eyed look at the nature of human suffering, its causes, and the path that leads beyond it. He spent the next 45 years of his life walking from village to village, sitting with farmers and kings and outcasts alike, sharing what he had found. This video is an introduction to those teachings. It is for people who are curious, but perhaps feel uncertain where to begin. It is for people who have heard words like karma, meditation, or mindfulness and wondered what they actually mean at their roots. And it is for people who simply feel in their bones that there must be a wiser, gentler way to live, and who are ready to take a first look at what that might be. You do not need to become a Buddhist to benefit from what follows. You do not need to shave your head, wear robes, or abandon your current life. The Buddha himself would have been the first to tell you not to accept anything simply because he said it. He was famous for encouraging people to test his teachings against their own experience, like a goldsmith testing metal in fire. If something is useful, keep it. If it does not apply to your life, set it down. So let us begin. Not with doctrine or dogma, but with a simple observation. With the one thing that every human being alive has in common, regardless of where they were born or what they believe. Let us begin with the fact of suffering. The first noble truth life contains suffering. The first thing the Buddha ever taught after his awakening was something that might sound, at first, like bad news. He said that life involves suffering. In the original language, the Pali word he used was dukkha, and though it is often translated as suffering, it is actually a richer and more nuanced word than that. It carries the meaning of unsatisfactoriness, of a wheel that is slightly off its axle, of something that does not quite roll the way it should. Dukkha is not just about dramatic pain or loss, though it certainly includes those things. It is also about the more subtle, low-level dissatisfaction that hums beneath the surface of ordinary life. The cup of tea that was perfect when you first tasted it but now has gone cold. The vacation you looked forward to for months, which was wonderful, but which also carried within it the knowledge that it would end. The warm feeling of falling in love, which is real and precious, but which also contains vulnerability and the possibility of change. The Buddha was not being pessimistic when he pointed this out. He was not a gloomy man. Descriptions of him, preserved in the ancient texts, consistently portray him as serene, often gently smiling and radiating a quiet warmth. He pointed to dukkha not to depress anyone, but because he knew that until you honestly acknowledge a problem, you cannot begin to address it. Think of it this way. If you have a splinter in your finger and you pretend it is not there, if you say to yourself, everything is fine, just keep going, the splinter does not disappear. It festers. It grows more painful. But if you stop, look at your finger, and say, yes, there is something here that needs attention, then you have taken the first step toward healing. The Buddha taught that there are, broadly speaking, 3 kinds of suffering. The first is straightforward physical and emotional pain, illness, grief, loneliness, fear. This kind of suffering everyone recognizes, even if no one likes to dwell on it. The second kind is subtler, the suffering of change. Everything pleasant is impermanent. Every joy contains within it the seed of loss. Every beautiful morning carries the afternoon. Every youth contains the quiet approach of age. We know this, and yet we are rarely fully prepared for it when it arrives. The third kind is the subtlest of all, the suffering that comes from the nature of conditioned existence itself. Because we and everything around us are constantly changing, constantly dependent on conditions, there is an inherent instability to life. Nothing is solid ground. Nothing stays exactly as it is. And clinging to the idea that it should, that is, at the deepest level, the root of a tremendous amount of human pain. Let us sit with this for a moment, because this insight, simple as it sounds, is actually quite profound. Almost everything we do in daily life is, in one way or another, an attempt to manage the fact of impermanence. We buy things to feel secure. We seek approval from others to feel valid. We plan and strategize and worry in order to control a future that is, by nature, uncontrollable. We hold on to youth, to relationships, to an idea of how our life is supposed to look with an intensity that, when we really examine it, is exhausting. The Buddha said, look at this honestly, do not look away, not because suffering is all there is, but because understanding it clearly is the beginning of freedom. There is a famous parable that illustrates this beautifully. It is sometimes called the parable of the poisoned arrow. A student once came to the Buddha and demanded answers to metaphysical questions. Is the universe eternal? What happens after death? Is the self real? The Buddha gently declined to answer these questions and instead offered this image. Suppose a man has been shot with a poisoned arrow. His friends want to help him. But before he will let them pull the arrow out, he insists on knowing who shot him, what village that person was from, how tall they were, what kind of wood the arrow was made of. What would happen to that man? The student understood immediately. The man would die. He would die before any of his questions were answered, because he was so focused on the questions that he forgot about the arrow in his chest. The Buddha said, the pressing question is not the metaphysics of the universe. The pressing question is, you are suffering. How do we address that right now in this life? That is the arrow. Let us deal with the arrow. This is one of the things that makes the Buddha's teachings remarkable. They are practical. They are grounded in the immediate reality of human experience. They do not ask you to wait for another lifetime or to trust in an invisible promise. They ask you to look at what is happening right now in your own heart and to see it clearly. But the Buddha did not stop with the diagnosis. He was not content simply to say, yes, life is hard. He went on to ask the next question, which is, why? What causes this suffering? Because if we can understand the cause, then perhaps we can do something about it. The second noble truth, the cause of suffering. If the first noble truth is the diagnosis, the second noble truth is the identification of the cause. The Buddha called it tanha, which is often translated as craving or thirst. And he taught that this craving, this reaching, grasping, clinging quality of the untrained mind is at the root of our suffering. Now, this is a subtle teaching, and it is easy to misunderstand. The Buddha was not saying that desire itself is bad, or that you should stop wanting anything altogether. He was not saying that joy is wrong, or that you should become a stone statue unmoved by life. He was making a more precise and interesting point. There are two kinds of wanting. There is the simple, natural desire to eat when you are hungry, to rest when you are tired, to connect with others, to pursue meaningful work. These desires are part of a healthy life. They arise and, when met, they rest. They have a kind of ease to them. Then there is a different quality of wanting, the compulsive, anxious, grasping kind. The kind that says, I cannot be okay until I have this. Or, I will not be happy until things are different from the way they are. Or, if I just get what I want, then I will finally feel complete. This second kind of wanting, the Buddha said, is tanha, and it is a thirst that, paradoxically, is never satisfied, because every time you get what you wanted, the wanting mind simply moves on to the next thing. There is a wonderful image for this in the Buddhist tradition. It is the image of the hungry ghost. In the traditional cosmology, a hungry ghost is a being with an enormous aching stomach, but a neck so thin that nothing can pass through it. It is permanently hungry. It can see food everywhere, but can never eat. This is a mythological image, of course, but it is also a precise description of the grasping mind. The grasping mind is never satisfied, not because life is inherently unsatisfying, but because the mind itself keeps adding conditions to its happiness. When I get the promotion, when the relationship feels perfect, when I lose the weight, when people understand me, when the world is finally the way I want it to be. And here is the other side of craving, aversion. Because the same grasping mind that clings to pleasant experiences also pushes against unpleasant ones. It says, I cannot stand this feeling. Make it stop. This is too much. I hate this situation. I refuse to accept this reality. And that refusal, that resistance, that pushing away of what is actually present, that too is a form of tanha. That too is a source of tremendous suffering. The Buddha used the phrase second arrow to describe this. Imagine you are walking through a field and an arrow strikes you. That is pain. Pain is part of life. It is unavoidable. But then, imagine that you immediately shoot yourself with a second arrow, the arrow of anguish, self-pity, blame, and resistance. The first arrow is the pain. The second arrow is the suffering you add on top of the pain. You feel physical pain in your back. That is the first arrow. Then you think, this is terrible. Why is this happening to me? What if it never gets better? My life is ruined. That is the second arrow. And the second arrow, the Buddha said, is optional. It is not inevitable. It is not caused by the original pain. It is caused by the way the mind relates to the pain. This does not mean pretending that pain is not real. It does not mean spiritual bypassing, the practice of using spiritual ideas to avoid dealing with genuine problems. It means something more subtle and more powerful. It means noticing the difference between the raw experience of difficulty and the layers of story, resistance, and catastrophizing that the mind wraps around that experience. Pain says, my back hurts. Suffering says, my back hurts, and that means everything is terrible, and my life is falling apart, and I am worthless, and nothing will ever be okay. Can you feel the difference? The Buddha was pointing to the space between stimulus and response, the moment before the mind launches its second arrow. In that space, he said, there is freedom. There is also another dimension to this teaching, the craving for existence itself, the craving to be something, to be seen as something, to establish a permanent, solid self that will endure. This is perhaps the deepest form of tanha. We cling to our identities, our stories about ourselves, our reputations, our ideas of who we are. And when those things are threatened, when someone criticizes us, when we fail, when life does not confirm the story we tell about ourselves, the pain can be enormous. The Buddha was saying, look at that clinging. Look at how much energy you spend maintaining the self-image, defending it, polishing it, worrying about it, and ask yourself, is there a different way of being? He was not asking you to destroy yourself or deny your existence. He was asking whether there might be a lighter way of holding the self, a way that does not require such constant maintenance, such constant defense. He was suggesting that the sense of a fixed, permanent, separate self might itself be a kind of illusion, not that you do not exist, but that the rigid, bounded, isolated self you think you are might be more fluid, more interconnected, and more spacious than you have been led to believe. This is one of the most fascinating and difficult teachings in Buddhism, and we will come back to it. But for now, let us stay with the practical dimension, the recognition that our suffering is not caused simply by what happens to us, but largely by the way our minds relate to what happens to us. And that insight, even when held lightly, even as an idea to begin exploring, is already a small form of liberation. Because it means that you are not simply at the mercy of circumstances. It means that there is something you can do, not to control the world, but to cultivate a different relationship with it. And that brings us to the third noble truth, which is perhaps the most encouraging of all. The third noble truth: there is a way out. After identifying suffering and its cause, the Buddha made a startling claim. He said that the ending of suffering is possible, not a partial reduction, not a minor improvement in mood, but a genuine, radical freedom from the compulsive cycle of craving and suffering. He called this nirvana, which literally means something like the extinguishing of a flame or the cooling of a fever. This is the third noble truth, that there is a cessation of dukkha, that liberation is real, that the wheel can stop spinning. Now, at this point, many Western students of Buddhism feel a little uncertain. The word nirvana can sound either impossibly otherworldly or frustratingly vague. Is it a magical state? Is it nothingness? Is it only for monks who spend decades in caves? What does liberation actually feel like in ordinary life? The Buddha was characteristically reluctant to describe nirvana in elaborate detail because he knew that words about it could easily become another object of craving. You could end up spending your whole life chasing an idea of enlightenment rather than actually living with greater freedom. He said it was better to focus on the path that leads toward liberation than to argue about the destination. But he did give some clues. He described it in terms of what it is not. It is the ending of greed, hatred, and delusion. It is the cessation of the thirst that drives suffering. It is described as peaceful, as cool, as a great letting go. And those who have made significant progress on the path describe something like this: a growing capacity to be present with life as it is, without the constant overlay of craving and resistance. A sense of increasing spaciousness, a lightening of the burden of self, a deep, quiet joy that does not depend on circumstances. You may have had moments of this in your own life, even if you have never heard of nirvana. Moments when you were fully present, perhaps in nature, perhaps in creative work, perhaps in deep conversation, and the usual background noise of the mind grew quiet. Moments when you were not wishing things were different, not worrying about the future or regretting the past. Moments of simple, clear aliveness. The Buddha would say, that is a small glimpse, a hint of what becomes possible when the practice deepens. It is important to note that the Buddha did not teach that nirvana requires abandoning the world. He himself returned from under the Bodhi tree. He did not stay in some private bliss. He walked right back into the marketplace, back into human company, and spent decades as an engaged, active, responsive teacher. His liberation was not a retreat from life, but a transformed engagement with it. He was fully present, fully caring, and fully effective, but without the reactive compulsions that drive most human behavior. This suggests that liberation is not about becoming passive or detached in a cold sense. It is about becoming more fully alive, more genuinely loving, more truly present, because you are no longer spending so much energy defending, grasping, and resisting. There is a beautiful teaching in this regard, from a different tradition that echoes the Buddhist insight. A rabbi once asked his students, "What is the holiest moment?" Some said, "The Sabbath." Some said, "The moment of prayer." The rabbi shook his head. He said, "The holiest moment is the one you are in right now. This is very close to what the Buddha was pointing at. The liberation is here, in this moment, available, whenever we are willing to stop rehearsing the past or rehearsing the future long enough to actually be present." The third noble truth is a teaching of hope, not a false hope that says everything will be okay if you just believe hard enough, but a grounded, practical hope that says the nature of the mind can change. The grip of craving can loosen. A different way of living is not just theoretically possible, it has been demonstrated again and again by real human beings across 2,500 years. And you too can walk in that direction. But how? That is the fourth noble truth. The fourth noble truth, the path. The fourth noble truth is the practical heart of all Buddhist teaching. It is called the Noble Eightfold Path, and it is a description of the way of living that leads toward greater freedom, greater clarity, and greater peace. The word noble here does not mean aristocratic. It means something more like worthy or excellent or leading in the right direction. And the word path is crucial because it conveys that this is not a destination you arrive at once and then rest. It is a way of walking through life. A set of ongoing practices and orientations that gradually, steadily transform the quality of your experience. The Eightfold Path is traditionally described in three groupings: wisdom, ethical conduct, and mental training. Each one supports the others. They are not steps in a strict sequence, like rungs of a ladder. They are more like the spokes of a wheel, all working together to keep the whole structure turning. Let us walk through each of them, one by one, and spend real time with each, because each one is a universe of practice in itself. The first spoke is called right understanding, or sometimes right view. This is the foundational wisdom, having a clear and honest understanding of the nature of reality. It means understanding, at least intellectually, and then, through practice, experientially, the Four Noble Truths. It means understanding impermanence, that everything arises, exists for a time, and passes away. It means understanding the interconnected, conditioned nature of all things. And it means understanding karma, not in the popular culture sense of cosmic reward and punishment, but in the original sense, that actions have consequences, that the quality of mind with which you act shapes both your current experience and the conditions of your future experience. Right understanding does not mean memorizing philosophy. It means being willing to see things as they actually are, rather than through the filter of wishful thinking, fear, or habitual assumption. It means being willing to look clearly at your own mind, your own patterns, your own suffering, without flinching and without condemning. The second spoke is called right intention or right thought. This is about the orientation of the heart. The Buddha described three kinds of right intention: the intention toward renunciation, meaning the willingness to let go of clinging; the intention of goodwill, meaning the orientation toward the well-being of all beings, not just yourself; and the intention of compassion, meaning the heartfelt wish that suffering be lessened. These are not passive states, they are active, cultivated orientations. Each day, you can ask yourself, am I moving in the direction of letting go, or am I clinging more tightly? Am I genuinely wishing well-being for the people around me, or am I seeing them primarily in terms of what they can give me? Am I bringing compassion to the suffering I encounter, including my own? The third spoke is right speech. This is where the teachings begin to get very practical and very immediate, because speech is something you do dozens or hundreds of times every day. The Buddha identified 4 qualities of harmful speech: false speech, meaning lying; divisive speech, meaning speech that drives people apart; harsh speech, meaning speech that is cruel, contemptuous, or unkind; and idle speech, meaning speech that is empty, meaningless, and contributes nothing. Right speech, by contrast, is truthful, kind, unifying, and purposeful. It is speech that communicates honestly but also with care. It is speech that builds rather than destroys. It is speech that considers the effect of the words before they leave the mouth. Think for a moment about your own speech patterns over the past few days. How much of what you said was truthful and kind? How much was complaint, gossip, or grumbling? How much was said out of habit rather than genuine need? How much was designed to impress, manipulate, or defend? This is not an exercise in guilt. The Buddha was not interested in guilt, which is just another form of suffering. It is an exercise in honesty, because honest awareness is the beginning of change. The fourth spoke is right action. This covers the basic ethical dimensions of behavior: not taking what is not freely given, not harming living beings, acting with integrity in sexual and relational matters. Again, these are not commandments from on high. They are practical observations about what kinds of behavior tend to create harm and what kinds tend to create well-being for yourself and for others. The Buddha was not naive about the complexity of ethical life. He understood that situations arise where simple rules are not enough, where genuine wisdom and discernment are needed. Right action is not about following a rule book. It is about developing the sensitivity and the care to act from genuine concern for well-being, rather than from selfishness, fear, or habit. The fifth spoke is right livelihood. This extends the ethical concern into the domain of work: how we spend our days, how we earn our living, whether our work in the world contributes to or detracts from the well-being of others. The Buddha was specific about certain occupations that he considered incompatible with the path work that involves killing, deception, or exploitation. But the deeper question he was asking is more universal. Does your work in the world reflect your values? Does it allow you to maintain your integrity? Does it contribute something of genuine value? In the modern world, this can be a genuinely difficult question. Many people find themselves in work that feels meaningless or even harmful, constrained by economic necessity. Right livelihood is not meant to add guilt to that difficulty. It is meant to encourage a genuine, ongoing reflection about the relationship between how we spend our time and what we genuinely care about. The sixth spoke is right effort. The Buddha was a great believer in effort. He was not a fatalist. He did not think things would improve on their own without any engagement from us. Right effort means the effort to prevent harmful states of mind from arising, to let go of harmful states that have already arisen, to cultivate wholesome, positive states of mind, and to sustain and deepen those wholesome states. This requires energy. It requires what the tradition sometimes calls the warrior's quality, the willingness to show up day after day, to face the mind honestly, to keep going even when it is hard. But it is also important to note that the Buddha did not teach a grinding, joyless striving. He was very aware of the problem of too much effort, a mind that is too tense, too grasping, even about the project of liberation, cannot settle into the ease that genuine practice requires. There is a famous story about this. A young monk named Sona was practicing walking meditation so intensely that his feet bled. He was getting frustrated. Despite all his effort, his mind would not settle. The Buddha came to him and asked, "Were you a musician before you became a monk?" "Yes," said Sona, "a lute player." The Buddha asked, "When the strings of the lute were too tight, did the lute play well?" "No," said Sona. "And when they were too loose?" "Also no." "Right," said the Buddha. "The path of practice is the same. Not too tight, not too loose. Find the middle way." The seventh spoke is right mindfulness. This is perhaps the most well-known aspect of Buddhism in the modern world, and it has, in many ways, filtered into mainstream culture in the form of mindfulness meditation, mindfulness-based stress reduction programs, and similar practices. But the Buddha's teaching on mindfulness was richer and more comprehensive than simply relaxation or stress management, though those benefits are certainly real. Right mindfulness means a quality of deliberate, gentle, non-judgmental attention to present moment experience. It means paying attention, really paying attention, to what is happening in the body, in the feelings, in the mind, and in the broader experience of being alive. The Buddha described 4 foundations of mindfulness: the body, feelings, mental states, and the nature of experience itself. Mindfulness of the body means paying attention to physical sensations, to the breath, to the body's movement and posture. This is where most formal meditation practice begins, simply sitting, feeling the breath entering and leaving, noticing what arises with curiosity rather than judgment. Mindfulness of feelings refers not to emotions in the complex sense, but to a more basic quality. Is this experience pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral? This is a crucial practice because it is precisely when an experience is pleasant that craving arises, and precisely when it is unpleasant that aversion arises, and precisely when it is neutral that the mind tends to drift toward inattention. Simply noticing these qualities, without being swept away by them, is itself a profound practice. Mindfulness of mental states means noticing the quality of mind in each moment. Is there greed? Is there aversion? Is there spaciousness? Is there agitation? Without judgment, without trying to immediately change anything. Just what is here right now. And mindfulness of the nature of experience means a deeper investigation into the impermanent, interconnected, conditioned nature of all that arises. This is where mindfulness becomes wisdom, where simple attention opens into genuine insight. The 8th and final spoke of the path is right concentration. This refers to the deepening of meditation practice into genuine states of inner stillness and absorption. The word concentration here is a translation of the Pali word samadhi, which really means something more like unification of mind, the gathering of scattered attention into a quiet, focused, stable awareness. The Buddha described several stages of deepening concentration, each bringing greater stillness, greater clarity, and greater joy. These deep states of meditation are not the goal in themselves. The Buddha was always clear that concentration is a means, not an end, but they are the ground in which wisdom can flower. Together, these 8 aspects of the path form a way of life, not a set of rules to follow grimly, but an invitation to live with greater care, greater awareness, and greater compassion in every domain of experience. The teaching of impermanence, everything passes. Of all the Buddha's insights, perhaps none is more fundamental than the teaching on impermanence. In Pali, the word is anicca, and the Buddha said it is one of the 3 fundamental characteristics of all conditioned existence, along with dukkha and anatta, which we will come to shortly. Impermanence means everything changes. Everything that arises passes away. Every thought, every feeling, every sensation, every situation, every relationship, every mood, all of it is in motion. All of it is in the process of becoming something else. Nothing is fixed. Nothing is permanent. Everything is as the tradition puts it, like a dream, like a bubble, like a flash of lightning. On one level, most people already know this. We know that life changes. We know that people die, that youth fades, that circumstances shift. We say things like, "Nothing lasts forever," and enjoy it while it lasts. But there is a difference between knowing something intellectually and having genuinely seen it, felt it, integrated it into the way you live. And the Buddha was pointing to the second kind of knowing, because most of us, most of the time, live as if things were permanent. We plan and worry and scheme as if the life we have now were a fixed platform, as if the relationships we cherish were guaranteed to stay exactly as they are, as if the body would continue performing as expected, as if the mood we are in right now is how we will feel forever. And then, when change comes, as it always does, we are shocked, we are blindsided. We suffer not just because the change happened, but because some part of us genuinely believed it would not. The Buddha was not asking us to be morbid about impermanence. He was not asking us to spend our days dwelling on death and decay. He was asking us to live with what the tradition calls clear, seeing a gentle, ongoing awareness, that what we have is precious precisely because it does not last forever. And that awareness, far from making life less rich, actually makes it more vivid, more precious, more alive. There is a story that illustrates this beautifully. A student went to a Zen teacher and complained, "I feel so heavy. Everything in my life feels like a burden." The teacher took him outside and handed him a single stone, smooth and grey, about the size of a fist. "Hold this," said the teacher. The student held it. Not so bad. Then the teacher gave him another stone, then another, and another, and another, until the student's arms were straining and his face was flushed. "Now," said the teacher, "is the weight in the stones or in the holding?" The same teaching appears in the famous parable of the raft. The Buddha described someone who, after a long and difficult journey, comes to a great body of water with no bridge. They build a raft from whatever is at hand, sticks and leaves and grass, and they cross. When they reach the other side, they think, "This raft has served me so well, it would be a shame to leave it." And so they hoist it onto their shoulders and carry it on the land. The Buddha asked, "Would that be wise?" Of course not. The raft served its purpose. Now set it down. Walk on. He said, even these teachings are like a raft. Even the Dharma, even the path, even the practices, they are means, not ends. They are to be used and, when the time comes, released. Because the problem is always the same, clinging, holding on to what was useful, past the time of its usefulness, refusing to let go. Impermanence applies not only to outer circumstances, but to the inner life as well. This is one of the most genuinely liberating aspects of the teaching. The mind itself is impermanent. Thoughts are impermanent. Emotions are impermanent. The dark moods, the anxious spirals, the waves of anger or grief or despair, none of them are permanent. None of them define you. All of them will pass, the way clouds pass across the sky without leaving a mark. This does not make them unreal. The cloud of grief is real while it is present. The wave of anger is genuinely intense while it moves through you, but it will pass. It always does. And if you can hold that knowing, even faintly, even in the midst of the most difficult moments, it changes everything. There is a tale, told in many traditions, of a king who was plagued by the storms of his own emotions, elated one moment, despairing the next, caught in cycles of enthusiasm and depression. He summoned the wisest person in his kingdom and said, "I want you to make me something that will calm me when I am too excited and lift me when I am too low, something true in all circumstances." The wise person thought for a long time and then came back with a ring. On the ring was engraved 3 words, this too shall pass. The king wore the ring, and it worked. When he was triumphant and arrogant, he glanced at the ring and remembered, this too shall pass. And he tempered his pride. When he was in despair, he looked at the ring and remembered, this too shall pass. And he found hope. This is the teaching of impermanence, worn as a ring, not a reason for passivity or resignation, but a source of both humility in good times and resilience in difficult ones. The teaching of non-self, who are you, really? We have come now to perhaps the most challenging teaching in all of Buddhism, and certainly the most counterintuitive for most Western listeners. The Buddha taught what is called anatta, or non-self, the teaching that the fixed, permanent, independent self you think you are is not quite what it appears to be. Let me be careful here, because this teaching is very easily misunderstood. The Buddha was not saying that you do not exist. He was not saying that your experience is not real, or that you do not matter, or that there is no difference between you and anything else. He was saying something more subtle and, once you sit with it, more interesting than any of those things. He was saying, look at what you call yourself. Look at it carefully. What do you actually find? You might start with the body. Is the body the self? You have had many different bodies, the body of an infant, the body of a child, the body you have now, which is different from the one you had 10 years ago in every cell. Your body is continuously changing, continuously renewing itself, continuously in conversation with the world around it, breathing air, taking in food, releasing waste, exchanging molecules with everything it contacts. Is this fixed, bounded object the self? Then there are your thoughts. Are they the self? Notice how thoughts arise, often unbidden, often surprising, often contradicting each other. You think something you did not intend to think. A memory surfaces without your inviting it. An emotion arises that you would prefer not to feel. Are you the thoughts? Are you choosing every thought that appears? If so, why would you ever choose to think something you did not want to think? What about your emotions, your opinions, your preferences, your sense of humor, your fears? Look at any of them carefully, and you will notice they arose from somewhere. They were shaped by your upbringing, your culture, your experiences, your neurobiology, the countless conditions that conspired to make you who you are. How much of what you call yourself was truly chosen? How much of it is a pattern of conditions, arising and passing, no more fixed and permanent than a river? The Buddha said, when you look with genuine care and attention, you do not find a solid, permanent, unified self. What you find is a constantly changing stream of experience, physical sensations, feelings, perceptions, thoughts, states of consciousness, all of them arising and passing, none of them permanently the self. This does not mean the stream is not real. A river is real. It has a course, a character, a history, but you cannot step into the same river twice, as the ancient Greek philosopher Heraclitus observed. The river is always different water, always changing, and yet, still, the river. The Buddha used the image of a chariot to make this point. If you take apart a chariot, the wheels, the axle, the frame, the harness, where is the chariot? Is any one of those parts the chariot? Is the combination of them the chariot? Is there something additional, beyond all the parts, that you could point to and say, this is the chariot? Or is chariot simply a word, a convenient label, applied to a particular arrangement of conditions? This is not merely philosophical, it has profound practical implications. When you identify strongly with a fixed self, when you believe deeply that you are a particular way, that you have a particular nature that cannot change, you create enormous rigidity. You defend that self. You protect it. You feel threatened when it is challenged. You cannot easily learn from criticism, because criticism of your behavior feels like an attack on your very being. You cannot easily change because change feels like a kind of death. But if you hold the self more lightly, if you recognize that who you are is a process, a river, a pattern of conditions in continuous transformation, then you gain a remarkable freedom. You can learn more easily because you are not defending a fixed territory. You can change because change is what you are anyway. You can receive feedback without being devastated. You can make a mistake without it meaning everything. You also begin to feel something that the tradition calls interconnection. When the hard boundary of the separate self softens, what becomes apparent is how deeply, how thoroughly, how inescapably you are woven into the fabric of everything around you. The food that sustains you was grown by farmers you will never meet, in soil that formed over millions of years, watered by rain that fell from clouds that gathered over oceans you may never see. The language you think in was given to you by thousands of generations before you. The loves that have shaped your heart were given to you by other hearts. The very cells of your body are in continuous conversation with the world around them. The hard separate self is, in a sense, a beautiful fiction, a useful convention, like the concept of chariot that breaks down under close examination. What is actually here, when you look carefully, is something much more breathtaking. A universe in which nothing is truly separate, in which everything is deeply, intimately, inextricably connected. Now, this does not mean that you stop using the word I. It does not mean that you stop having preferences, making decisions, or taking responsibility for your actions. The teaching of non-self is not a license for irresponsibility. If anything, it deepens responsibility, because when you truly feel your interconnection with others, their suffering becomes your suffering, and their well-being becomes something you genuinely care about. The Buddha himself offers a model for this. He was not annihilated by his awakening. He did not cease to be a particular person with a particular life. He still had preferences, a distinct personality, a characteristic way of engaging with the world, but he held those things lightly. He was not enslaved by them. He was not threatened when they were questioned, and he moved through life with a quality of freedom and compassion that those who encountered him found, by all accounts, genuinely extraordinary. The parable of the mustard seed, grief, and the universal truth. There is one of the most beloved stories in the entire Buddhist tradition, and it speaks directly to one of the most difficult dimensions of human life, the loss of those we love. A young woman named Kisa Gotami had a son who died in infancy. She was overwhelmed with grief, carrying the body of her child from door to door, asking neighbors and strangers if anyone had a cure, if anyone could bring her child back. People thought she had gone mad. But one person, kinder than the rest, told her, "Go to the Buddha, he is a great healer. Perhaps he can help." She went to the Buddha and placed the small body of her child at his feet and asked him to cure her child. The Buddha looked at her with great compassion. He said, "Yes, there is a cure. I need one thing from you. I need a handful of mustard seeds from a household that has never known death." Mustard seeds were common and easy to find. Kisa Gotami's face lit with hope. She went from house to house. She knocked on every door. She asked for mustard seeds. Everyone had them. Mustard was a staple. But when she added the second question, "Has your household ever known death?" every answer was the same. "We have lost a father. We have lost a child. We have lost a grandmother, an uncle, a neighbor, a friend." House after house, the same answer. Everyone had known death. No household had been spared. As the day wore on, something shifted in Kisa Gotami. The grief that had been suffocating her began to open into something broader. She began to see, this is not a curse that fell only on me. This is the nature of life. Death comes to every household. Loss visits every heart. She was not singled out. She was not abandoned. She was human, among humans, all of them touched by the same mystery. She went back to the Buddha. She did not have the mustard seeds. She understood why. The Buddha asked her gently what she had found. She told him, and she said, "I understand now." She left the body of her child at the edge of the forest, in the way of her culture, and asked the Buddha to teach her. She became one of his most devoted students. This story is not about telling grieving people to stop grieving. The Buddha does not say to Kisa Gotami, "Your grief is irrational, get over it." He does not dismiss her love or minimize her loss. What he does is find a way to place her loss within the larger context of shared human experience. Her grief was real, her love was real, and she was not alone. Death is part of life. And knowing that deeply, not just intellectually, changes something. There is a profound compassion in this teaching. When we suffer in isolation, believing that we alone have been singled out by misfortune, the suffering doubles. We add to the pain of the loss, the additional pain of feeling abandoned, uniquely cursed, somehow wrong. When we understand that suffering is woven into the fabric of human experience, that every person who has ever lived has known grief, loss, fear, and longing, the isolation dissolves. We are still sad, but we are sad together. And sadness shared is, in a mysterious way, both more bearable and more profound. The Buddha was not a cold philosopher standing apart from human suffering. He was someone who walked among people in their pain, who met them exactly where they were, who knew from his own investigation what it meant to face the difficult truths of existence. His compassion was not the easy compassion of someone who has not suffered. It was the harder, more genuine compassion of someone who has looked clearly at suffering and found, through that clarity, a path to its relief. Karma, actions and their consequences. The word karma has traveled far from its origins. In popular culture, it has come to mean something like cosmic justice. You do something bad, the universe punishes you. You do something good, the universe rewards you. This is a simplification that, while not entirely wrong, misses much of what the Buddha actually taught about karma. The word karma simply means action. Every action, physical, verbal, or mental, has consequences. That is the basic teaching. What you do, say, and think shapes both the immediate quality of your experience and the conditions of your future experience. The nature of those consequences is not arbitrary. It is not handed down by a judge sitting outside the universe. It is the natural, impersonal result of cause and effect. Think of it this way. When you act from anger, you reinforce patterns of anger in the mind. The neural pathways of reactive thinking are strengthened. You are more likely to respond with anger the next time. The people around you, experiencing the effects of your anger, respond in ways that may create more situations likely to trigger anger. Nothing supernatural is needed to explain this. It is simply how causes and effects work in the human mind and in human relationships. Similarly, when you act from generosity, you strengthen the habit of generosity. You feel better about yourself. The people around you feel cared for and are more likely to be generous in return. A positive cycle reinforces itself. Again, no cosmic bookkeeper is needed. Causes have effects, actions matter. But the Buddha went deeper than simple behavioral patterns. He taught that the most significant aspect of karma is the quality of intention behind an action. It is not enough to ask, "What did I do?" You must ask, "Why did I do it? What was in my heart when I acted?" An action done out of genuine care, even if it produces imperfect results, creates different karma than the same action done out of selfishness or fear. The intention is the seed, the results are the fruit. And the quality of the fruit depends largely on the quality of the seed. This is both humbling and enormously encouraging. It is humbling because it means you cannot hide behind good results if your motivation was corrupt. It is encouraging because it means that the cultivation of genuinely wholesome intentions is one of the most important things a human being can do, not as a means of accruing cosmic points, but as a way of genuinely shaping the quality of experience for yourself and for those around you. The Buddha also taught that karma is not destiny. The fact that your past actions have shaped your current circumstances does not mean that your current circumstances are fixed and unchangeable. You are always in the position of acting, of choosing how to respond, what intention to bring, what action to take. The past has shaped the field, but the next seed you plant is up to you. This is the teaching of karma as freedom, not fatalism, but responsibility. There is also a teaching about the limits of karma, which is sometimes overlooked. The Buddha was clear that not everything that happens to us is the result of our own past actions. Some events are the result of physical causes, environmental causes, social causes, random chance. The ancient commentaries list multiple factors that shape human experience, only one of which is karmic intention. Illness, for example, may arise from diet or genetics or environmental factors, not necessarily from some past deed. The Buddha cautioned against the simplistic view that every misfortune is karmic punishment. Such a view leads to a lack of compassion for those who are suffering. This nuance matters. Karma is not a weapon to blame the suffering. It is a teaching about the power and responsibility of intention. It is an invitation to look honestly at the quality of mind you bring to your actions, and to recognize that quality matters, that it shapes the world you and others inhabit. Compassion and loving kindness, the open heart. If wisdom is one wing of Buddhist practice, compassion is the other, and without both wings, the bird cannot fly. The Buddha was not only a philosopher of mind, he was an exemplar of what the tradition calls Brahmaviharas, which means something like the divine abodes or the immeasurable qualities of heart. There are 4 of them, and they form the foundation of Buddhist ethical and emotional life. The first is metta, which is usually translated as loving kindness or benevolence. It is the genuine, heartfelt wish for the well-being of all beings, not just the people you love, not just the people who are easy to care about, but everyone, including strangers, including people who have wronged you, including yourself. This last point is important. Many people, when they first encounter the practice of loving kindness meditation, find it surprisingly difficult to extend genuine kindness toward themselves. They can wish well-being for others more easily than they can wish it for themselves. The Buddha's teaching is that genuine compassion for others must rest on a foundation of genuine compassion for oneself. You cannot pour from an empty cup. The instruction to love your neighbor as yourself, which appears in many wisdom traditions, implies that you are also in need of and deserving of love. Loving kindness practice typically begins with oneself, then extends outward to loved ones, to neutral people, to difficult people, and finally to all beings everywhere without exception. The phrase used in traditional meditation is something like, "May you be happy, may you be healthy, may you be safe, may you live with ease." These are not empty words. They are the deliberate cultivation of an orientation of care. And that cultivation, practiced consistently, gradually transforms the quality of mind. The usual background noise of judgment, criticism, and reactivity softens. A warmer, more open quality of attention begins to arise, not just in formal meditation but in daily life. The second divine abode is karuna, which means compassion, the wish that beings be free from suffering. Where loving kindness is warm and expansive, compassion is specifically responsive to pain. It is the quality that moves you when you see someone in distress, not to turn away but to turn toward. The third is mudita, which means sympathetic joy or empathetic joy, the capacity to genuinely rejoice in the well-being and happiness of others. This is, in some ways, the rarest of the four. Most of us find it relatively easy to feel compassion when others suffer, but can you genuinely, without any trace of envy or comparison, feel happy when someone else is happy? Can you celebrate another's success without any shadow of diminishment? Mudita is the practice of learning to do exactly that. The fourth is upekkha, which means equanimity, a quality of balanced, open, non-reactive awareness that is neither cold detachment nor emotional flooding. Equanimity is the ground on which the other three can rest without burning out or collapsing into sentimentality. It is the quality of the steady heart that can be fully present with joy without grasping, and fully present with pain without being overwhelmed. Together, these four qualities, loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity, form what the Buddha called the immeasurable heart. They are called immeasurable because, when fully cultivated, they have no limits. They extend to all beings, in all directions, without distinction or preference. It is worth sitting with this for a moment. Most of us live with what might be called a tiered compassion: deep care for immediate family, moderate care for friends and community, diminishing care as the circle widens, and not much active care at all for people we will never meet. The Buddha's invitation was towards something radically different, a compassion that is genuinely universal. Not because we can equally love everyone in the same intense, personal way, but because the well-being of every being is equally real and equally mattering. This is not an instruction to be soft or to have no boundaries. Compassion does not mean accepting harm or becoming a doormat. It means holding the well-being of all beings as genuinely important, including your own, and acting from that understanding. The Buddha himself was a model of active compassion. He did not hesitate to challenge powerful people when they were acting harmfully. He confronted kings when their governance was causing suffering. He broke social taboos by teaching outcasts and women, groups who were excluded from spiritual education in his society. His compassion was not passive. It was engaged, clear-eyed, and sometimes fierce. Mindfulness in daily life, waking up in the ordinary. One of the most powerful and accessible teachings the Buddha offered is about how to bring the quality of mindfulness into ordinary daily activities. Not just during formal meditation, but while walking, eating, speaking, working, and resting. The Pali word sati, usually translated as mindfulness, carries the sense of remembering specifically, remembering to be present. Most of the time, we are doing something while thinking about something else entirely. We are eating breakfast while reading the news. We are with a friend while half composing an email in our minds. We are driving while planning a conversation we need to have. This divided attention is so normal that we rarely notice it, but the cost is real. We are, in a sense, only partially here for our own lives. The practice of mindfulness is the practice of being fully where you actually are, of giving your full, undivided attention to the actual experience of this moment, not the story about this moment, not the judgment of this moment, not the comparison of this moment to other moments, just this. The Buddha used the example of eating. When you eat, simply eat. Notice the texture of the food, the way the flavor changes, the sensations of chewing, the satisfaction of swallowing. Be actually here for the experience of eating, rather than somewhere else in your mind while your body goes through the mechanical motions. This is not just a meditation technique. When you are actually present for eating, you eat more consciously. You taste the food more fully. You are more naturally aware of when you have had enough. The simple act of paying attention changes the experience. The same applies to walking. There is a traditional walking meditation in which you walk slowly, feeling each step, the lifting of the foot, the movement through space, the placing down. This is the formal practice, but the same quality can be brought to any walk going to the car, walking from one room to another, moving through the grocery store. The question is simply, am I here? And to listening. When someone is speaking to you, are you actually listening? Or are you preparing your response, half thinking about something unrelated, waiting for your turn to speak? Full listening, the kind where your whole attention is with the person speaking, is one of the most profound gifts you can give another human being. And it is rare. People often say, after a conversation with someone who was truly listening to them, that they felt deeply understood, even if nothing particular was resolved. The quality of attention itself is nourishing. There is a story of a student who came to a Zen master and said, "I have been studying for years and I feel I have made no progress. What am I doing wrong?" The master said, "Have you eaten today?" "Yes," said the student. "Have you washed your bowl?" The student paused. "Yes," he said, slowly. "There is your practice," said the master. The teaching is not that meditation is unimportant. It is that the divide between meditation and life is artificial. Every moment of genuine attention is meditation. Every genuine return to the present moment is practice. Washing the bowl with full, clean attention is as profound as any formal sitting. Meditation, sitting down with the mind. Though mindfulness can be practiced in every moment of life, the formal practice of sitting meditation remains the foundation of the Buddhist path. It is the place where the mind's habits are most clearly seen and most directly worked with. It is the laboratory of the inner life. Sitting meditation in the Buddhist tradition does not require special equipment, unusual physical flexibility, or years of preparation. You can begin right now, exactly as you are. Find a comfortable position sitting on a chair, on a cushion, on the floor where you can hold your back relatively upright without straining. Let your hands rest naturally. Let your eyes close or leave them slightly open with a soft, downward gaze. And then, simply be here. That sounds simple, and in some ways it is. But if you have ever tried it, you know that it immediately reveals something remarkable. The mind has its own agenda. Within moments of sitting down to be still, the mind begins to produce thoughts, memories, plans, worries, fantasies, judgments, observations, commentaries. The mind, untrained, is almost never quiet. It is like a busy marketplace, noisy, crowded, full of activity. Most beginning meditators encounter this and feel they are failing. They say, "I cannot meditate. I cannot stop thinking." But this misunderstands the practice. Meditation is not about stopping thinking. It is about changing your relationship to thinking. It is about noticing when the mind has wandered away from the present moment, which it will, over and over and over, and gently, without judgment, returning it to the anchor of the breath. The breath is the most commonly used anchor in Buddhist meditation. It is always present. It is always now. It is a bodily process that happens on the boundary between voluntary and involuntary, a useful bridge between the conscious and the less conscious aspects of experience. Simply feeling the breath, the sensation of air entering the nostrils, the rise and fall of the chest or the belly is the basic instruction. When a thought arises, you notice it. You do not fight it or engage with it. You simply recognize thinking, and you return to the breath. When emotion arises, you notice it, and you return to the breath. When sounds intrude, when physical sensations call for attention, when the mind argues that this is boring or uncomfortable or pointless, you notice, and you return to the breath. The returning is the practice. Every return is a small act of freedom, a moment when you choose awareness over automatic reaction. And over time, with consistent practice, this capacity for return strengthens. The gap between stimulus and response grows wider. The mind becomes less reactive, more spacious, more capable of choosing. There is no fixed amount of time that constitutes proper meditation. The Buddha himself meditated for long periods, but he taught people at all stages of life with widely varying circumstances. Even 5 minutes of genuine, attentive sitting is valuable. The Dalai Lama, when asked how much time people should meditate, is said to have replied, "Those who are very busy should meditate for 1 hour a day. Those who are extremely busy should meditate for 2 hours." His point was gentle. The more scattered and overwhelmed the mind, the more it needs the anchor of practice. Beyond simple breath awareness, the Buddha taught many meditation practices: loving-kindness meditation, compassion meditation, insight meditation, into the 3 characteristics of impermanence: non-self and unsatisfactoriness, death contemplation, body scanning, mindfulness of emotions. Each serves a different function. Each cultivates different qualities. But all of them share the essential ground: the willingness to sit down, to be still, and to look honestly at the mind. The middle way, finding balance. When Siddhartha Gautama was a prince, he lived in extraordinary luxury. His father, anxious to protect him from the suffering of the world, surrounded him with pleasure and abundance. Siddhartha had everything material comfort could provide, and yet he was not at peace. The nagging sense that something essential was missing led him, eventually, to leave the palace. After leaving home and his family, he joined a group of wandering ascetics renunciants who practiced extreme self-denial as a path to liberation. They believed that by punishing the body, by fasting, by exposing themselves to heat and cold and physical pain, they could transcend the limitations of material existence and find spiritual freedom. Siddhartha was thorough and determined. He practiced these austerities more intensely than anyone. He fasted until his ribs were visible, until he was so weak he could barely stand. And he found it did not work. The mind was no clearer for the body's suffering. The spirit was not liberated by the flesh's punishment. He was just very, very thin and very, very weak. At a low point, he accepted a bowl of rice milk from a young woman named Sujata. His companions were scandalized. They thought he had given up. They left him. Siddhartha ate. And then, restored, he sat under the Bodhi tree and followed the path of careful, balanced attention, not extreme indulgence and not extreme deprivation, to his awakening. This is the origin of what the tradition calls the middle way, the path that avoids the extremes of excessive pleasure-seeking on one end and excessive self-denial on the other. The middle way is not a compromise. It is not splitting the difference and ending up with mediocrity. It is something more subtle and more alive. The path of balance, of intelligent responsiveness, of neither suppressing experience nor being carried away by it. The middle way applies at every level of practice. In meditation, it means not forcing the mind into artificial stillness and not allowing it to run wild. In ethical life, it means neither rigid rule-following nor complete permissiveness. In relation to the body, it means neither indulgence nor punishment, but genuine care. In relation to desires, it means neither suppression nor enslavement. The middle way is, in a sense, the teaching of wisdom itself, the capacity to respond to each situation with the precise quality and degree of engagement it actually requires, rather than defaulting to either extreme out of habit, fear, or reactivity. Interdependence, nothing exists alone. One of the most beautiful and far-reaching of all the Buddha's insights is the teaching of dependent origination, called in Pali Paticca Samuppada. In simple terms, it is the understanding that nothing exists independently. Everything arises in dependence on other conditions. Everything is embedded in a web of causes and effects so vast and so intricate that, when you follow any single thread far enough, you eventually find that it is connected to everything else. The Buddha formulated this as a kind of universal principle. When this is, that is. From the arising of this comes the arising of that. When this is not, that is not. From the cessation of this comes the cessation of that. This might sound abstract, but its implications are profound. Consider a single flower. That flower exists because of the seed from which it grew, and the seed because of the previous flower, and that flower because of all the conditions, soil, rain, sunlight, temperature that sustained it. The soil itself is the product of millennia of geological and biological processes. The rain comes from clouds that gathered over seas and mountains. The sunlight travels 93 million miles from a star that formed from cosmic dust. You cannot trace the lineage of that single flower without finding the entire universe implicated. The same is true of a thought. Your thought arises from neural processes in your brain. Those neural processes were shaped by experiences, your upbringing, your education, your relationships. Those experiences were shaped by social and cultural and historical conditions. Pull on any thread of who you are, and you find it connected through a web of conditions too complex to fully trace, to all of human history, to the physical universe, to the circumstances of this particular moment on this particular planet. This is not a reason for helplessness. Knowing that everything is interconnected does not mean that nothing you do matters. Quite the opposite. Because if everything is interconnected, then every action, however small, genuinely ripples outward into the web. Every act of kindness matters. Every word spoken with care matters. Every moment of genuine attention matters. Not because the universe is keeping score, but because causes have effects, and your actions are causes. The teaching of interdependence is also, in many ways, an ecological insight. The Buddha, who lived in close relationship with the natural world, taught a deep reverence for all living beings, founded on the recognition that all life is interconnected, that harm to one part of the web eventually harms the whole. This dimension of Buddhist teaching has much to offer to the conversations our world most needs to be having right now. And it is also a teaching about love. When you truly feel your interconnection with another person, when you genuinely understand that their well-being and yours are not separate, that your happiness and their suffering cannot be fully unrelated, then care for others is not a duty or an obligation. It is a natural response to reality, dealing with difficult emotions, working with the inner storm. Buddhist practice is not about becoming emotionally bland. It is not about suppressing feelings or achieving a kind of spiritual numbness. It is about developing a wiser, more compassionate relationship with the full range of human emotional experience, including the difficult parts. The Buddha taught a great deal about what he called the hindrances, mental states that obstruct clarity and equanimity. The 5 classic hindrances are sensory craving, ill will, sloth and torpor, restlessness and worry, and doubt. These are the inner states that most commonly undermine both meditation and daily life. Everyone who has ever tried to meditate has encountered them. Everyone who has ever tried to live well has met them. Sensory craving, the restless reaching for more pleasure, more stimulation, more of whatever feels good. It is not that pleasure is bad. It is that the mind addicted to seeking pleasure cannot rest. It is always looking past the present moment to the next pleasant thing. Ill will, the reactive, resistant quality of the mind that encounters something unpleasant and immediately responds with irritation, anger, or resentment. Ill will can be large and obvious. Real anger at someone who has hurt you, or small and subtle. A slight edge of annoyance at a noise, or a slow driver, or a remark that touched a sensitive spot. Sloth and torpor. The heavy, dull, disengaged quality of mind that cannot gather itself into genuine attention. It is the mental equivalent of trying to see through muddy water. Restlessness and worry. The agitated quality that cannot settle, that keeps rehearsing problems, planning the future, going over the past, the mind that cannot stop moving. And doubt, not the healthy skepticism that questions ideas and tests assumptions, but the corrosive doubt that undermines all effort, that says it is hopeless, nothing works, you will never change. What is the point? The Buddha's approach to these hindrances was not suppression. He did not say, push them down, pretend they are not there. He said, see them clearly, name them, and, as much as possible, understand the specific antidote to each. For sensory craving, the antidote is the contemplation of impermanence, remembering that even the most delicious experience is temporary, and that the pleasure of simple presence is more available and more durable than any acquired pleasure. For ill will, the antidote is loving kindness, the deliberate cultivation of warmth toward the person or situation that is generating the aversion. For sloth and torpor, the antidote is energy, lightening the breath, opening the eyes, bringing fresh motivation and curiosity to the practice. For restlessness and worry, the antidote is calming, deliberately slowing the breath, relaxing the body, bringing attention back to the anchor of the present. For doubt, the antidote is reflection on the teachings themselves, on the accounts of those who have found their way through this same difficulty, and on the evidence of your own experience that practice, however imperfect, does bear fruit. There is a story that many find deeply comforting. On the night of his awakening, as the Buddha sat under the Bodhi tree, he was visited by a figure the tradition calls Mara, which represents the forces of delusion, temptation, and resistance. Mara came with armies of fear and desire. He challenged the Buddha's worthiness. He offered him pleasures. He threatened him with horrors. And the Buddha, again and again, simply recognized him. Mara, I see you, he said. The seeing itself broke the spell. This is the teaching. The power of difficult mental states lies largely in not being seen clearly. When you recognize the arising of anger, when you say to yourself clearly and honestly, anger is here, not I am angry, which fuses your identity with the state, but anger is here, which simply observes it, something shifts. The state loses some of its automatic grip. You have created a small space between the experience and the reaction. And in that space, choice becomes possible. Forgiveness and letting go the weight we carry. Among the practical teachings of Buddhism, few are more immediately relevant to ordinary human life than the teaching on forgiveness and the letting go of grievance. Because most of us are carrying, somewhere in the chambers of our hearts, old hurts that have not been fully released, old wrongs, real or imagined, that have calcified into resentment, old stories about how we were betrayed or diminished or failed by someone or something. The Buddhist teaching on this is both gentle and clear. Resentment harms you more than it harms the person it is directed at. Holding a grudge is sometimes described as drinking poison and expecting the other person to be harmed. This is not a way of minimizing real harm. It is not a way of saying that what was done to you does not matter, or that you were not genuinely wronged, or that you should simply forget and pretend everything is fine. It is saying something more nuanced, that the ongoing nursing of resentment, the replaying of the offense, the burning energy of unforgiveness, these are forms of suffering that you are creating in yourself. In the present, long after the original event has passed. Forgiveness, in the Buddhist sense, does not mean condoning harmful behavior. It does not mean restoring a relationship that was genuinely toxic. It means releasing the grip of resentment for your own sake. It means allowing the past to be the past, rather than dragging it constantly into the present. There is a profound teaching here about the nature of the present moment. The original hurt may have happened months or years ago, but every time you replay it with fresh resentment, you are creating a new hurt in this moment. Every time you allow the story of that old wound to generate fresh pain, you are choosing, however unconsciously, to wound yourself again now. Forgiveness is, at its root, the decision to stop doing that. This is not easy. The mind clings to grievance, in part because grievance feels like protection. As long as I am angry at you, something in the mind says, I am safe from being hurt again. But this logic is illusory. The anger does not protect, it simply perpetuates suffering. The practice of loving kindness is one of the most effective tools the tradition offers for working with resentment. Beginning with yourself, genuinely wishing yourself well-being, and then, gradually, carefully, extending that wish toward the person you are struggling to forgive, not bypassing the hurt, not pretending it did not happen, but, very gently, allowing the heart to consider the possibility that even this person who caused you real pain is a human being who is also suffering, who is also navigating confusion and fear and difficulty, who is also, in their own way, trying to find their way in the world. This does not justify harm, but it humanizes the one who caused it, and humanization makes the grip of resentment a little easier to release. The Buddha and suffering his own journey. It is worth spending time with the story of the Buddha's life, not because the details are certain they have been told and retold across 25 centuries, and the historical record is imperfect, but because the arc of the story itself carries important teachings. Siddhartha was born into privilege and comfort. His father was a local ruler, a man of wealth and influence, and from the moment of Siddhartha's birth, there were said to be predictions that this child would become either a great king or a great spiritual teacher. His father, wanting the former, surrounded Siddhartha with beauty and pleasure and deliberately shielded him from the sight of suffering. But you cannot hide reality forever. According to the stories, one day, the young Siddhartha went out of the palace grounds with his servant and encountered what the tradition calls the four sights. He saw an old man, bent and frail, and was told, "This is old age, and it comes for everyone." He saw a sick man, feverish and in pain, and was told, "This is illness, and it comes for everyone." He saw a corpse and was told, "This is death, and it too comes for everyone." And finally, he saw an ascetic, a wandering holy man, poor in material terms, but with a quality of inner peace that Siddhartha found deeply striking. These sights shook him to his core. He was a young man of extraordinary privilege, and suddenly, unavoidably, the reality of the human condition was before him. Not that life is unpleasant, he had had every pleasure, but that life, without understanding, is shadowed by suffering, and that understanding, if it exists, is worth more than all the comfort in the world. He left the palace, left his wife and newborn son. This is the part of the story that modern people sometimes find troubling. How could he leave his family? But it is important to understand the cultural context. In the India of his time, a man who became a renunciant did not simply abandon his family to destitution. There were established cultural forms for this, and his family would have been provided for. And, more importantly, he left in order to find a liberation that, he believed, would ultimately benefit not just his family but all beings. He did not leave because he did not love. He left because he loved enough to try to understand and end suffering at its root. His journey was not easy. He tried and abandoned various teachers and methods. He practiced extreme austerities, as we have discussed. He came very close to death. And then he sat down under the Bodhi tree in what is now Bodh Gaya in Bihar, India, and resolved not to rise until he had found the truth. What happened under that tree is described in various ways, in various texts. The tradition says he sat through the night, moving through deepening states of meditative absorption and insight, until, at the moment of dawn, something opened in him that had never opened before. He saw clearly the nature of suffering and its arising and its cessation. He saw the chains of dependent origination unfolding and releasing. He saw the liberation that is possible for a human mind that has genuinely understood. After his awakening, he sat for several days in the forest, not yet certain whether to teach. What he had seen seemed so difficult to convey, so contrary to the habitual assumptions of the untrained mind. Who would understand? Who would listen? The tradition says that a compassionate impulse arose in him. There are beings whose eyes are only slightly veiled by dust, who would understand if they heard this teaching. And out of compassion for those beings, and, by extension, for all beings, he rose and walked toward the city of Varanasi to find his 5 former companions and began to teach. He taught for 45 years, until his death around the age of 80. He died peacefully, in the presence of many of his students, reportedly saying, "All conditioned things are impermanent. Work out your salvation with diligence." His last words, as the tradition has preserved them, are themselves a teaching, stories from the Sangha, learning from the community. The Buddha did not teach in isolation. He taught within the context of a community, called in Pali the Sangha. The Sangha, alongside the Buddha himself and his teachings, forms the 3 jewels of Buddhism, the 3 fundamental refuges that a Buddhist practitioner takes. Going for refuge to the 3 jewels means, in essence, orienting one's life toward the path of awakening, the teachings that describe it, and the community of those who are walking it. The Sangha is, in a very practical sense, part of the path. It is the community that supports, challenges, inspires, and holds the practitioner accountable. The Buddha is reported to have said, when a student suggested that good friendship was half of the holy life, "Say not so," said the Buddha. "Good friendship is the whole of the holy life." This is a remarkable statement from someone who had sat alone under a tree and awakened by himself. He was saying, do not underestimate the power of community. Do not try to do this alone. The people you surround yourself with, the quality of your relationships, the conversations you have, the values you share with those close to you, these are not peripheral to your practice. They are the environment in which practice lives or dies. There are many stories from the Sangha that illuminate the teachings from unexpected angles. One that is often told is the story of the monk Patakara, a woman who came to the Buddha after a series of devastating losses. Her husband had died, both her children had died, and she was in a state of grief so profound that she had lost her mind. She wandered, barely clothed, into the assembly where the Buddha was teaching. Some people tried to turn her away, but the Buddha stopped them and spoke to her directly with great gentleness. He said, "Sister, come to yourself." And, in the warmth of his attention, something in her cleared. She came to herself. She sat down. She listened. He did not offer her a quick fix. He did not pretend her losses were not real. He taught her about impermanence, about the nature of suffering, about the path. And she, having genuinely faced the worst of what life can bring, was able to hear the teachings with a depth and a directness that fewer people ever achieve. She went on to become one of the most accomplished meditators and teachers of her generation, known especially for her ability to reach out to others who were grieving. The Sangha is full of people like Patakara, people who came to the practice through the door of real suffering, who found, in the teachings and the community, something that the marketplace of distraction and consolation could not provide, who found, in the willingness to look honestly at the nature of suffering, the beginning of a genuine freedom. The 10 perfections, the qualities of an awakened heart. In the Theravada Buddhist tradition, which is the oldest surviving school of Buddhist thought, there is a teaching about the paramitas, often translated as the 10 perfections or the 10 qualities of heart that the path of awakening cultivates. They are not commandments. They are not requirements for membership. They are observations about the qualities that naturally deepen in a person who is genuinely practicing, and they also serve as guideposts, as aspirations for the journey. The 10 perfections are generosity, ethical conduct, renunciation, wisdom, energy, patience, truthfulness, determination, loving kindness, and equanimity. Let us look at each briefly, not to be exhaustive, but to let each one open into the lived experience it describes. Generosity, the practice of giving, of opening the hand and the heart, of releasing the grip of possessiveness. The Buddha taught that generosity is one of the most powerful practices available to an ordinary person, not because it earns cosmic merit, but because it directly loosens the grip of the grasping mind. Every act of genuine generosity is a small act of freedom, a moment when you say, "I am not defined by what I hold." Ethical conduct, the practice of living with integrity in action, in speech, in the inner life, not as a performance for others, but as a genuine expression of care for the well-being of all. Living ethically, the tradition teaches, creates what is called a clear conscience, a quality of inner ease that is itself a support for meditation and for wisdom. Renunciation. This word can sound daunting, even grim, to modern ears. But in the Buddhist sense, renunciation does not primarily mean giving up outer things. It means the inner practice of not clinging, of holding things lightly, of recognizing that your happiness does not ultimately depend on acquiring or maintaining any particular circumstance. It is the practice of being with what is, rather than constantly reaching for what is not here. Wisdom, the quality of genuine understanding, not just intellectual knowledge, but the deep, transformative insight into the nature of reality that changes the way you live. Wisdom, in the Buddhist sense, is the fruit of sustained practice, of meditation, of ethical living, of genuine inquiry. It cannot be borrowed or inherited. It must be discovered in one's own experience. Energy, the quality of sustained engagement, of wholehearted commitment, of the willingness to keep going. Not the driven, compulsive energy of someone running from fear, but the warm, sustained energy of someone genuinely motivated by care and curiosity. Patience, the capacity to be with difficulty, with slowness, with uncertainty, without being driven by the need for immediate relief or resolution. Patience is not passivity. It is an active, engaged quality, the willingness to stay present even when presence is uncomfortable. Truthfulness, not just the commitment to factual accuracy, but the deeper quality of authenticity, of being genuinely who you are, without pretense or performance, of saying what is true even when it is difficult, of being in genuine relationship with reality rather than with the version of reality you would prefer. Determination, the quality of holding to the path, of persisting through difficulty, of not giving up at the first obstacle or the 100th. The spiritual path is not a straight line. It involves detours and setbacks and dark nights. Determination is the quality that keeps you going. Loving kindness. We have already spent time with this quality. Here it appears as a perfection, a quality that, with practice, becomes not just a state you sometimes achieve, but a fundamental orientation of the heart, the ground from which all action arises. Equanimity, the balanced, unshakable quality that can be present with both joy and sorrow without grasping or resisting. The still center from which genuine engagement with life becomes possible. These 10 qualities are not a checklist. They are, as the tradition teaches, the facets of a single jewel, the awakened heart, the the heart that has found its way to genuine freedom. The relationship between Buddhism and daily life. One of the most common misunderstandings about Buddhism is that it is primarily for monks and people with the luxury of extended retreat time, that it requires removing yourself from the ordinary world in order to practice. The Buddha himself addressed this concern repeatedly, teaching lay practitioners, people with families, jobs, and ordinary lives alongside the monastic community. The teachings are fully applicable to life as it is actually lived, in relationships, in work, in raising children, in dealing with finances, in navigating the complexity of modern existence. In some ways, the ordinary world is the perfect meditation hall, because it is precisely in the friction and richness of daily life that the mind's habitual patterns most clearly reveal themselves. Consider the workplace. In the workplace, you encounter praise and blame, success and failure, colleagues you find easy to work with, and colleagues who challenge every fiber of your patience. You encounter your own reactions, the surge of pride when things go well, the contraction of shame when they do not, the flicker of envy when someone else succeeds. These are precisely the conditions in which the teachings about equanimity, about the impermanence of outcomes, about the non-self nature of praise and blame become immediately and urgently relevant. Consider relationships. In intimate relationships, everything that has not been healed in you will, eventually, be brought into the light. The triggers you thought you had resolved, the fears you thought were behind you, the patterns of reactivity that seem to vanish in times of ease, all of them are likely to appear when you are tired, when you are stressed, when the person you love does or says something that bumps up against an old wound. The teachings on compassion, on non-self, on the second arrow, on loving kindness in the laboratory of intimate relationship, they find their deepest testing and their most profound confirmation. Consider parenting. The Buddha said that the greatest gift you can give your children is your genuine presence. Not the most expensive toys or the finest education alone, but the quality of attention, the quality of care, the genuine sense that you see them, that they matter to you not for what they achieve, but for what they are. And this presence, genuine presence, not distracted, not half absent, not managed, is itself a practice, as demanding and as rewarding as any formal meditation. The Buddha taught that there are 5 things that lay practitioners, people living ordinary lives, would do well to cultivate: being generous, being ethical, being reliable and trustworthy, acting from genuine care rather than calculation, and holding wisdom as the highest value. These 5 qualities, practiced in the midst of everyday life, form the foundation of a life well lived, whether or not one ever enters a meditation center or reads a word of classical Buddhist scripture. Transforming anger, the fire in the house. Anger is one of the emotions that Buddhism addresses with particular directness and care. In the tradition, anger is often compared to a fire in the house. It harms the one in whom it burns, even before it harms anything outside. The Buddha did not teach that anger is always wrong or that you should never feel it. He recognized anger as a natural response to genuine harm, injustice, or threat. What he was concerned with was the relationship to anger, the tendency to feed it, to justify it, to allow it to take over and drive behavior in ways that cause further harm. He used a vivid image. Imagine someone gives you a gift of burning coals, put into your hands. What do? You put them down. You do not hold on to them. And yet, he said, when someone insults you or wrongs you and you pick up the burning coal of anger and hold it, nursing it and warming yourself with its heat, who is being burned? The practice around anger is, again, not suppression, but awareness. When anger arises, and it will, the first step is simply to recognize it, to name it clearly and honestly. Anger is here. To feel it in the body without being swept away, to give it the acknowledgement it demands, without giving it the authority it does not deserve. From that place of recognition, genuine choice becomes possible. You can choose to act from the anger, knowing the likely consequences. You can choose to wait, allowing the heat to cool before responding. You can choose to inquire into what lies beneath the anger, because anger often covers other emotions: hurt, fear, shame, grief, that deserve more direct attention. And you can choose, over time and with practice, to begin meeting the situations that would have triggered anger with a quality of mind that is a little more spacious, a little less reactive, a little more genuinely responsive. The Buddha was also realistic about the slowness of this transformation. He was not selling overnight fixes. The reactive patterns of the mind have been laid down over many years, even many lifetimes, in the traditional understanding, and they do not dissolve in a single meditation session. But he was very clear that change is possible, that the mind's habits are not fixed, and that consistent practice does, over time, genuinely alter the quality of one's reactivity. There is a story about a notorious bandit named Angulimala who was terrorizing a region, killing people and wearing a necklace of fingers. When the Buddha heard of him, he walked directly into the area where Angulimala operated. His followers were terrified, but the Buddha went. When Angulimala saw him and came to threaten him, something in the quality of the Buddha's presence, utterly unafraid, utterly present, utterly compassionate, stopped him. They talked. Angulimala, who had apparently done terrible things because of a kind of psychological breaking point, found in the Buddha's presence something he had never encountered before. Someone who saw him without judgment, without fear, without contempt. He became a monk. He practiced, and he was, by all accounts, one of the most genuinely transformed students in the entire tradition. This story is not meant to minimize the harm he caused, or to suggest that all harmful people are simply waiting for compassion to change them. It is meant to demonstrate the radical nature of the Buddha's belief that no one is beyond the possibility of awakening, that the deepest transformation is possible for human beings, regardless of their past. The wisdom of uncertainty, living with not knowing. We live in a culture that is deeply uncomfortable with uncertainty. We want answers. We want assurance. We want to know what is going to happen, how things will turn out, whether our choices are the right ones. And the mind's default response to not knowing is usually anxiety, the frantic scanning of the environment for threats, the rehearsal of worst-case scenarios, the frantic reaching for certainty in a world that offers none. The Buddha's teaching offers a different relationship with uncertainty. Not a false certainty. The Buddha was famously unwilling to make claims beyond what could be genuinely known and experienced, but a genuine ease with not knowing, grounded in trust in the path itself. The tradition sometimes talks about beginner's mind, a concept closely associated with Zen Buddhism but resonant across the whole tradition. Beginner's mind is the quality of approaching each moment with freshness, with genuine openness, as if encountering it for the first time. It is the opposite of the habitual mind that has already categorized and filed and decided about everything before it has really looked. The beginner's mind is spacious. It has room for surprise, for new information, for being wrong. The expert mind, the mind that believes it already knows, is closed. The Buddha valued this quality enormously. He said that the teachings themselves should be held with what he called a willingness to investigate, not a doctrinal certainty. He was not building an institution that required intellectual submission. He was inviting an ongoing, living inquiry into the nature of experience. Living with not knowing, practiced as a genuine spiritual orientation, has some extraordinary benefits. It reduces anxiety, because anxiety is largely about the future, and the future is inherently unknown. To be genuinely comfortable with not knowing is to be genuinely comfortable with the present, which is the only moment in which life actually occurs. It deepens curiosity because you are no longer defending a fixed position. It deepens honesty because you are no longer invested in being right. It opens the door to genuine connection with others because you can listen to them without the layer of judgment and categorization that usually filters what you hear. The Buddha said once, "I teach suffering and the end of suffering." He did not say, "I have all the answers." He said, "Here is what I have found. Here is the path that led there. Walk it for yourself and see." The art of deep listening, a gift to others. Among all the practical gifts that Buddhist practice offers for daily life, deep listening may be among the most immediately transformative, both for the one who practices it and for those who receive it. Most of the time, when someone is speaking to us, we are not really listening. We are waiting. We are preparing our response. We are half thinking about something else. We are filtering what they say through the mesh of our own assumptions, judgments, and reactions. We hear fragments, fill in the gaps with our own projections, and respond not to what was actually said, but to the version of it that passed through our mental machinery. The Buddha taught a different quality of listening. It begins with the same instruction that underlies all mindfulness practice. Be present. Actually be here, with this person, in this moment. Let go of your internal commentary. Let go of the urge to fix, to advise, to compare. Simply receive what is being offered. This quality of listening is extraordinarily rare, and people can feel it. When someone listens to you with genuine, undivided attention, something relaxes in you. You feel less alone. You feel seen. You have room to think more clearly, because you are not spending energy defending yourself against judgment or trying to make your point before you are interrupted. The tradition describes this as a kind of generosity. The gift of attention, the gift of genuine presence. It costs nothing in material terms, and yet it is among the most valuable things one human being can offer another. In the context of conflict, and Buddhist teachings have a great deal to say about conflict, deep listening is often the thing that makes resolution possible when all other approaches have failed. When someone who feels unheard, unseen, or dismissed is met with genuine listening, the energy of the conflict often shifts. Not because the issue is resolved, but because the basic human need that underlies most conflict, the need to be genuinely acknowledged, has been met. The Buddha was a master of this. His conversations, as preserved in the texts, are remarkable for their responsiveness. He did not give the same teaching to everyone. He listened first, genuinely listened to the person's actual question, to the place from which they were speaking, to the particular shape of their confusion or their pain. And then he responded to exactly that, not to a generic question, not to his own agenda, but to the precise thing that was actually needed in that moment. Impermanence and beauty, the gift in the passing. There is a Japanese aesthetic concept called mono no aware that is deeply resonant with Buddhist understanding. Mono no aware translates, roughly, as the pathos of things, or the gentle sadness of impermanence. It is the feeling that arises when you watch cherry blossoms fall, a beauty tinged with poignancy, because you know the blossoms will not last. It is what you feel in the last hours of a beautiful vacation, or at the end of a perfect evening, or when you watch a child you love taking one of those small but irreversible steps toward independence. This feeling is not pure sadness. It is something richer and more tender, a bittersweet awareness of the preciousness of what is present, heightened by the knowledge that it will pass. The Buddha's teaching on impermanence, held well, produces something like this. When you genuinely understand that nothing lasts, you relate to what is present with a quality of care and appreciation that is simply not available to the mind that takes everything for granted. The meal tastes better when you know that meals do not last forever. The conversation is richer when you are genuinely present rather than already somewhere else in your mind. The sunset is more beautiful when you are actually watching it rather than composing the caption. One of the most moving passages in the entire Buddhist canon concerns the death of the Buddha's beloved attendant, Ananda, who was with him for the last 25 years of his life. Ananda, knowing the Buddha was dying, was so overwhelmed with grief that he went behind a wall and wept. The Buddha asked where Ananda was, and when he was found, he did not tell Ananda that grief was wrong or that he should not feel sad. He acknowledged his loss. He praised Ananda's decades of service with great warmth, and he reminded him gently of what they both knew. All conditioned things pass. The grief was real, the love was real, and the impermanence was real. These three things do not contradict each other. They belong together. And when you hold all three at once, when you can love deeply, grieve genuinely, and understand impermanence clearly, you are living with a quality of aliveness that is itself a form of liberation. Karma and rebirth, holding the mystery lightly. No treatment of Buddhism would be complete without some acknowledgement of the teachings on karma and rebirth, which form an important part of the traditional Buddhist worldview. And at the same time, any honest discussion must acknowledge that these are among the most complex and most disputed aspects of Buddhist teaching, and that different traditions within Buddhism interpret them quite differently. The Buddha lived in a culture that accepted the idea of rebirth as a background assumption, a world where the continuity of consciousness across multiple lifetimes was taken more or less for granted. Within that context, his teaching on karma took on cosmic scope, not just the consequences of action in this lifetime, but the conditions created for future lifetimes. In the traditional understanding, karma does not operate only within the span of a single life. The intentions and actions of this life help shape the conditions of future existences. Beings move through cycles of birth, death, and rebirth, what the tradition calls samsara, the wheel of existence driven by the force of unresolved craving and delusion. The goal of the path is to eventually bring that wheel to rest, to cultivate enough wisdom and compassion that the conditions driving rebirth are no longer present. Different contemporary teachers and traditions hold this teaching in different ways. Some take it literally, some understand it metaphorically, as a way of describing the continuity of karma across generations, or the sense in which the patterns we enact in our lives ripple forward into the lives of those who come after us. Some hold it lightly, as an interesting possibility that cannot be definitively confirmed or denied, and focus primarily on the immediately verifiable dimensions of the teaching. The Buddha himself, it is worth noting, was characteristically empirical about this. He did not ask people to believe in rebirth as a matter of faith. He said, "Look at the results of the practice. Investigate your own mind. See what you find." The core teachings, the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, the teaching on impermanence and non-self and interdependence, these do not require any particular metaphysical framework to be useful and true. They can be tested and confirmed in the laboratory of direct experience. What is clear, whatever your view on rebirth, is the urgency and preciousness of this life. The traditional teachings are unanimous on this point. A human birth is considered extraordinarily rare and valuable because it is in human life that the conditions for genuine awakening are most available. You have the capacity for reflection, for moral choice, for genuine inquiry. Do not waste it. That teaching rings true regardless of whether one takes rebirth literally. The four foundations of mindfulness, a complete practice. We touched earlier on the four foundations of mindfulness, and it is worth returning to them in more depth, because they constitute what might be called the complete map of mindfulness practice, the full scope of what careful attention can reveal. The first foundation is mindfulness of the body. The body is always in the present moment. The mind can be anywhere in the past, the future, in fantasy or worry, but the body is always here, always now, always providing a direct anchor to present reality. Mindfulness of the body means cultivating ongoing awareness of physical sensation, the weight of the body in the chair, the feeling of the ground under the feet, the sensations of breathing, the quality of physical ease or tension. In formal meditation, this often begins with a careful, systematic scan of the body from head to foot, simply noticing what is present. This practice, over time, produces a quality of groundedness and embodied presence, a genuine inhabiting of the physical life that is surprisingly rare in a culture that tends to privilege the life of the mind. Many people live primarily from the neck up, largely disconnected from the ongoing stream of somatic experience. Mindfulness of the body is an invitation to come home to the full reality of being alive in a body. The second foundation is mindfulness of feelings, in the specific sense we discussed, not complex emotions, but the basic tonal quality of experience. Is this pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral? This seemingly simple observation cuts to the heart of how suffering arises. It is precisely when something is pleasant that craving begins. It is precisely when something is unpleasant that aversion begins. And it is precisely when something is neutral that unconscious inattention tends to arise. Simply noticing this tonal quality over and over in hundreds of daily moments builds a profound understanding of how the grasping and resisting mind operates. The third foundation is mindfulness of mind states, not the content of thoughts, not what you are thinking about, but the quality of the mind in which the thinking is occurring. Is the mind contracted or open, agitated or still, generous or grasping, clear or confused? Learning to recognize the quality of one's own mind in real time is one of the most powerful forms of self-knowledge available. The fourth foundation is mindfulness of dharmas, often translated as mental objects or simply as the nature of experience itself. This is where mindfulness opens into genuine investigation, noticing the arising and passing of all phenomena, observing the operation of the hindrances and their counterparts, and ultimately perceiving directly the three characteristics of impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, and non-self in every arising moment. Together, these four foundations provide a complete framework for a practice that is simultaneously concrete and profound, accessible to beginners, and inexhaustible even for those who have been practicing for decades. The noble silence when words fall short. There is a dimension of the Buddha's teaching that does not come in the form of words. The tradition describes him as sometimes responding to questions with what is called the noble silence, a deliberate, pregnant stillness that was itself a teaching. When asked certain questions, especially metaphysical ones about the ultimate nature of reality, about what happens after death, about whether the universe is finite or infinite, the Buddha would simply remain silent. This was not evasion. It was a teaching about the limits of language, about the nature of the questions themselves, and about the value of direct experience over conceptual elaboration. There is something here that is profoundly relevant to modern life, which is extraordinarily word-heavy, opinion-heavy, and concept-heavy. We are surrounded by an ocean of language news, commentary, social media, podcasts, conversations, the endless internal monologue. And in that ocean, genuine silence is very hard to find. But silence is where the deepest things live. Silence is the condition in which genuine insight arises, in which the mind can actually hear itself, in which the quality of attention can deepen past the surface level of verbal thought. The Buddha did not use silence as a method of escape from difficulty. He used it as a method of clarity. In silence, the quality of mind becomes evident in a way that is simply not possible when it is drowned in words. The practice of intentional silence, sitting quietly for a period each day, turning off the background noise, resting in simple awareness without any agenda, is one of the most genuinely countercultural acts available in the modern world. And it is, in its way, a direct expression of one of the Buddha's most fundamental teachings. Stop running, stop reaching, stop filling every moment with activity and noise. Be still, and in that stillness, find out who you actually are. Putting it all together, a day in the light of the teachings. Let us imagine a single day viewed through the lens of what the Buddha taught. Not a day of a monk or a saint, but an ordinary day, the kind of day most people live. You wake in the morning, and the first moments of waking are significant. Before the mind rushes into the day's agenda, there is a brief window of natural openness, a moment before the usual mental machinery kicks in. Buddhist teachers often recommend resting in that openness for a moment, not launching immediately into planning, checking the phone, running through the to-do list, just here, awake, alive. Another morning, you might take a few conscious breaths, not as a ritual or a performance, but simply as an anchor, feeling the breath, arriving in the body, acknowledging this day. Through the morning, you might bring a gentle quality of attention to whatever you are doing, eating breakfast rather than reading and eating simultaneously, noticing the flavor, being actually here for the meal. This is not asceticism, it is presence, and presence makes the meal better. In interactions with others, with family, with colleagues, in the small encounters of ordinary life, you might bring a little of the intention of right speech. Is what I am about to say truthful? Is it kind? Is it necessary? Not as a rigid filter that makes every interaction stilted, but as a gentle, ongoing orientation. When difficulty arises, the inevitable frustrations, the unexpected complications, the moments when things do not go as planned, you might notice the arising of the second arrow. The first arrow, this is frustrating. The second arrow, this is terrible. Why does this always happen to me? My whole day is ruined. And you might, in that noticing, have a choice. Not a choice to pretend the frustration is not real, but a choice about how much of the day to give it. In the course of the day, you might take a few moments simply to pause, to step outside if you can, to notice the sky, to feel your feet on the ground, to breathe. These micro pauses are not indulgences, they are maintenance. They are the moments when the quality of attention is refreshed and the mind is prevented from becoming so caught in its narratives that it loses touch with actual experience. And in the evening, you might spend some time in formal sitting, even 10 or 15 minutes, simply being with the mind, noticing what the day has stirred up, letting things settle, returning to the anchor of the breath, not analyzing or judging the day, but simply allowing the practice to continue its quiet work. This is not a perfect day. Difficulties will arise, reactions will happen, some moments will be wasted in distraction or reactivity. The practice is not about achieving a perfect score. The practice is simply about returning again and again to the intention, to be present, to be kind, to be awake. And over time, that returning accumulates. It becomes a habit, and then a disposition, and then slowly, gradually, with many setbacks and much forgiveness of oneself along the way, a way of being. Reflections for your own life, where to begin. Everything we have explored in this video, the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, impermanence, non-self, interdependence, compassion, mindfulness, the middle way, these are not ideas to be absorbed once and then filed away. They are practices to be lived over and over in the actual texture of daily life. If you are new to all of this and wondering where to begin, here are some possibilities. They are not obligations. They are simply doorways. Choose the one that calls to you and enter. Begin with the breath. Sometime in the next 24 hours, find 5 minutes to sit quietly and simply notice your breathing, not trying to breathe in any particular way. Just feeling the breath as it is, the sensation of air entering and leaving. When your mind wanders, and it will gently return to the breath, do this once, then again tomorrow. This simple, humble practice is the seed of everything else. Begin with impermanence. Choose one thing in your life that you have been taking for granted and look at it with fresh eyes. A relationship, a phase of your children's lives, the health of your body, the beauty of a season. See it clearly. Feel its preciousness and also its passing. Begin with the second arrow. The next time you find yourself suffering, pause and ask, is there a first arrow here? And is there a second? Can you feel the difference between the raw experience of difficulty and the layer of story, resistance, and catastrophizing the mind has wrapped around it? You do not need to dissolve the second arrow immediately. Simply seeing it is the beginning. Begin with loving kindness. Sometime today, wish someone genuine well-being, not as a performance, not with any expectation of return, but simply as an inward act. May you be happy. May you be healthy. May you be at peace. Begin with someone easy, someone you love, and then, if it feels right, extend it a little further. Begin with the Sangha. Find one other person who is interested in these ideas and talk to them about your experience. The conversation itself is practice. The sharing of genuine inquiry is the beginning of community. None of these practices require any special equipment, any membership in any organization, or any belief that you currently do not hold. They require only what you already have: a body, a mind, a willingness to pay attention. The Buddha's final instruction, as he lay dying, was to keep practicing with diligence, not to mourn him, not to debate the fine points of his teaching, but to keep practicing. This instruction is as fresh today as it was 25 centuries ago. The single clear takeaway, one thing to carry forward. We have traveled a long way together in this video. We have explored the nature of suffering and its causes. We have looked at the path that leads toward greater freedom. We have considered impermanence, non-self, interdependence, compassion, mindfulness, the middle way. We have sat with stories of grief and transformation, of bandits and women driven half-mad by sorrow, of monks who played their practice too tight, and a wise teacher who spoke to them of lutes. If you could carry only one thing away from everything we have explored today, what might that be? I would suggest this. The quality of your attention changes everything. Not the content of your attention, not what you are thinking about or what you are feeling, but the quality of presence you bring to your life as it is actually happening. The depth of your engagement with this moment, this breath, this conversation, this person in front of you, this meal, this ordinary morning. When you are genuinely present, not performing presence, not trying to seem mindful, but actually here, the suffering that arises from craving and resistance naturally diminishes. The beauty of ordinary experience becomes more available. The connection with others becomes more genuine. The decisions you make come from a cleaner, clearer place. The love you have to offer becomes fuller and less conditional. The Buddha awakened under a tree that still stands, in a form, in northern India. He awakened not by acquiring something he did not have, but by removing the veils of inattention, craving, and resistance that had obscured what was already present. His awakening was a return, a coming home to the nature of awareness itself. Your practice, whatever form it takes, is the same journey. It is not a project of self-improvement in the usual sense. It is a coming home, a returning to the aliveness that is already here. A recognizing of the intelligence, the compassion, the clarity that are not foreign to you but are, in fact, your deepest nature, temporarily obscured, by the clouds of habitual thinking, but never truly lost. The Buddha once asked a student, "Where do you think peace is to be found?" The student thought carefully. "In a quiet place," he said, "away from distraction. In the mountains, perhaps, or in a monastery." The Buddha shook his head gently. He said, "Peace is not found in a place. Peace is found in a quality of mind. Take that quality with you, and you will find peace anywhere. Leave it behind, and no place will give it to you. You do not need to go anywhere. You do not need to acquire anything. You do not need to become someone different from who you already are. You simply need to be where you already are, with a little more attention, a little more honesty, a little more care." That is, at its heart, the entire teaching. Wake up to the life you are already living. Bring your full heart to it. Walk gently, speak kindly, see clearly. And in that ordinary, moment-by-moment practice, the extraordinary quietly reveals itself. Thank you for spending this time in exploration. The seeds of this teaching have been planted. They will grow in the soil of your own living. Water them with attention. Let them grow in the light of genuine inquiry. And if you find them bearing fruit, if something in your experience shifts, if a moment of genuine peace opens, if a relationship deepens because of something you noticed, that is the teaching confirming itself in the only way that ultimately matters, in the texture of your actual life. May you be well. May you be at peace. May you find the freedom that is already waiting just beneath the surface of this ordinary, extraordinary moment. Closing note: the living tradition. A tradition that has sustained itself for 2.5 millennia has done so not because of its institutions, its buildings, or its texts, but because generation after generation of ordinary human beings have sat with these teachings, applied them to their lives, and found them true. The farmer who learned to hold his grief more lightly, the king who softened toward his subjects, the grieving mother who found in a community of practice the strength to continue, the scholar who discovered, through the simple practice of watching the breath, something that no amount of reading had revealed, the business person who began to notice the second arrow, the parent who learned to listen more deeply, the teenager who found, in an ancient teaching about impermanence, the words for something they had always sensed but never been able to name. These are not exceptional people. They are ordinary people, like you, who encountered these teachings and found in them something real, something useful, something pointing toward a life of greater freedom, greater kindness, and greater aliveness. The tradition is living. It is not a museum piece. It is not the property of any one culture or religion. It is a body of wisdom that belongs, in the deepest sense, to anyone who is willing to take it seriously. The Buddha, at the very end of his life, when his students asked him to name a successor, reportedly said, "Be a lamp unto yourself. Be your own refuge. Seek no outside refuge. Hold to the truth as a lamp. Hold to the truth as a refuge. Be a lamp unto yourself." Not in isolation, not without guidance or community, but with the confidence that the capacity for understanding, for compassion, for genuine freedom is not somewhere outside you. It is in you. It has always been in you. The teachings are the lamp that helps you see it. Light the lamp, walk the path, wake up, that is all.